You're really going to push it to the wall, aren't you, folks? Everybody's just going to watch this thing roll on them. And it could have been stopped so easy, so fast. And it's just going to get worse. Things are going to happen to us. We'll be led by the nose. At least the major populace will. And then we have the other problem where those of us that think we know what's going on, think we know what's going on. And yet we really won't step up to stop much of it at all. And we find out, I'll tell you, if you don't believe me, and you'll realize this when you get involved, you really don't even know how to engage the whole entire system at all. And so I ask you, just keep engaging. You'll start figuring that out pretty quickly. It's not a question what I bring out. You'll see the truth of it as soon as you get engaged. And if you don't see the truth now, you're not engaged. It's pretty simple. Like I see people talking about, I'm awake now, I took the red pill, and then they say, oh, they're alt-right. That's not the red pill. That's just another function of the mind control. As soon as the Matrix is not a movie. You have to literally unplug to find it. You have to then be able to go through that system in order to command it. Jumping from one side to another is really just doing that, from the frying pan to the fire almost, because then you think you got it all handled, and you really don't. And I say that not as an opinion, from an experience. I watch it all the time. It's coming up on a couple more big issues have coming up. People are defenseless against this oppression, and yet it's not that hard an answer. And the problem being, when we live in the occupied territory, there's more control on your mind than you might think, and that renders our remedies almost a wash, except for us, and that's the other point. And so I use these remedies that are about a wash to show other people that will be so inclined to understand what they are up against and how you literally can defeat it, but for that crime that sits in a seat of decision. So those of you on Pastcast and Prodcast and Recast over there at ucy.tv, this will be BTW RLM 236. Double a 36. That might be a special. Let's hope so. I know last week I thought was pretty neat. Used a twist on a term. It wasn't just a way to get the clicks, the Mandalay effect. Going off of the Mandela effects. We're going to find all kinds of coincidences with that, I believe. It's already happening. But I thought that was a pretty good, pretty natural title. And I don't know if it was just people looking for that story. We got a lot more clicks going on YouTube, and then showing over at Spreaker as well. Although I'm not so sure if I could get people to work in unison, I could actually start analyzing more of this better for y'all. But like if you go to Spreaker, put a like up, not even now for what you like, because this is all. It doesn't mean anything until we do something with it. If you go to Spreaker and put a like, I'll be able to tell how many Spreaker numbers are coming from YouTube, because they look like they're correlating very closely. I'd like to know that. But anyway, this Vince is helping putting that all up, and we've got quite a bit of contact. I hope the message I bring touches people in effective ways. There's a little bit more to that story, although I told you I'm not going to get into that matter too much. I'm more analyzing how they're doing it to us, how we analyze things. People are starting to pick up the sequence events. We can only predict. Most people now can see the prediction of what the next event will be, or within an event. I mean the stories and the news and all that. So that's a good part. But I don't want us to get. I guess my message here is don't get lost in it. Just identify it for what it is. Turn right back around and go after what you think you do. There's nothing in this story that caused me to waste a whole lot of extra time on it that I had to really spend my time on other things. So I only get this enough information for analyzing it, and then maybe to get a little bit broader spectrum to be able to speak about it to you. A couple more things on this. It just brings up it's the same sequence of events, just retold, replayed, with the same plan, unless there's other people learning that plan and pulling it off in major ways. My inclination is to believe it's the same group pulling off the same plan. There's only going to be a few people that have the ability to do this, but not unlike 9/11, where we heard that even the airlines were putting their in the stocks. They were betting against their own stocks right before trading was going on, right before the 9/11 thing. And you see other big events. When I say that, when they call them like they're big events, you see this happening. It happened again right after the breaking of last week. The Mandalay effect. This comes out. The owner of Mandalay Bay lost almost $1 billion in value after Las Vegas shooting. Well, I don't know who the owner of Mandalay Bay is, but I went and looked, and they have a story. Again, the Blogcaster will have all these links. They go through the story, and they talk about that I'll just read from the top. After police say 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, remember, the Paddock is a place they lock you in, and you were shot by someone with the name Paddock was pretty, I don't know, folks. It's just too much. There's more coming, more names that are just too much lock and step with this story. Paddock killed at least 58 people, wounded more than 500, and I'm not saying that 58 people didn't die. These can be combined events, whether you want to call them hoaxes or false flags. In false flags, people really die. It's just the reason who was starting and who was being said. So you don't have to get too wrapped up in all this. I can believe that 58 people die and 500 were wounded, but the 500 were wounded starts to play against the whole scenario. So this is how you start to analyze this thing. But it says the mass shooting at the Route 91 Harvest Festival in Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, the casino giant behind the hotel shed about $900 million from its market capitalization on Monday. Well, who's the casino giant behind the Mandalay Hotel? And I didn't know anything about these. I don't follow these people, but here it is. Shares of MGM Resorts International fell nearly 5% in trading value. Well, let's stop there. It fell, which you might think, right after the problem. The thing happens at the Mandalay. Well, MGM shares stock. Well, what happens last month? Not unlike what happened days before 9/11. On Tuesday, September the 5th, 2017, September 5th on 2017 was a board of MGM Resorts International decided to approve a $1 billion share repurchase program. Now, I'm not going to get too lost, but understand that this was supposed to say when they did that, these shares were going to increase in value. They were going to increase in value after this. But by the end of the week, MGM CEO James Murren had coolly divested himself of 80% of the shares he owned in his company. The divestment came just days before the ex-dividend date of September the 8th, 2017. So without getting too lost in this, why would he just divest himself of an increasingly valued stock? This doesn't make any sense. You can read more story about that, but right after the shooting, the MGM Resort stock plummets, at least by 5%. It went even higher than that after this story. Why would you sell the stock a month before when it was going to go up and then have this happen where the MGM Resorts loses billions here? Okay? It ends up being billions. So, interesting connection for the players. See, it's the same thing. I don't want to analyze it too much more. It happened, the same people, the corporations involved were, in fact, divesting, the people were divesting themselves of the interest or betting against themselves like they happened in 9/11 in I think, American Airlines stock. Just too shady, too coincidental, too consistent. And so we see the hand of the plan all over this. And it's so then we got to kind of understand that. I understand also, and I couldn't verify this as a quick. Again, I'm not putting a lot of time in here. Just of interest, any of those that want to be looking at this a little bit deeper and verify these things. Not only did the CEOs, but George Soros has said through some documentation that I couldn't figure out quick enough to be able to validate, but it's there to go look at. He did a put request against that stock right before it. So the same players are involved doing the same things, and I'm just going to leave that open to you all. There's to me, over all these years, I've been looking. You can tell who you're dealing with by how they act. You know them by their deeds. This is really not much farther, and I don't want to make this connection up too tight, then it was another example to us, stated in law, that you know them by their deeds. Where? It was in the Libra Code. You know a military occupation, a military condition, when you see them. And so this is pretty much simple. We're going to have to start observing. Like I said, it was a fault. We see the human frailty of our observation in the Mandalay effect. We see the lack of ability to observe correctly. We then make things up that may not be reality. We can't remember how things were, and then we see, oh, there's something some way else. It's just indicative of our inability to respond. I guess part of this is I'm trying to show you how you do that. We all do it. I'm not saying I'm immune. I'm suggesting it just puts more on us. It's one of those foibles in us that's being exploited. So I just want to, I guess that's the point about this whole thing for me. They went and done it again, folks. This is it seems to me, it really won't matter how many gunmen there were or not. It'll just be a lie that you're going to be shown that people are buying, that are being promoted to, and you buy into or you don't. And they keep you all divided up about this, all focused on too much. Yeah, there's certain things that really interest me, but there's some things that I know they're not important relative to how we're being taken down generally in all the areas that it's happening. Another incongruity, which pops up, the people aren't who they say they are, they can't find it. And then remember, we always have the system, the government, for good in some regard, not giving all the information out so they can go find those that have the information that no one else should know unless they were involved. We get the good information coming out, the ones that's withheld. I can see why that would be, but then you get these things that come up that are still anomalous, and they're denied and denied and denied, and the record shows that they're not right, and then you start wondering what the game is with the government now. What game are they playing? Well, you find out, like we found out before, we've known the FBI kind of runs these scams. The CIA kind of runs these scams. They're doing it for societal controls. That, by definition, is a terrorism. In the country of the United States, even underneath a new definition, when you change the political will of people by what you do, and this gun issue comes up right away with it, they want you to change your view on the Second Amendment. That is a terrorism. They want to show your political view is being altered by these actions. If it's an agency within the government or hired by way or whatever, however it gets that way, you are looking at a terrorism. I don't care how you want to portray it. So if we focus on that, now we have a little different view, at least I think we do have a different view. But the same players don't play out. They aren't who they say they are. Again, without going to crisis acting, we still have players inside the system that could be involved that are players. Las Vegas security guard shot by the Vegas killer is not registered as a security guard in the state of Nevada. So who are these people? How do they get around? What is the real security going on here? Who is involved? Why did the CEO of MGM Resorts sell off if he didn't know? Who's given the credentials to be doing what they're doing? They're also, claiming, and I'm not, again, part of me is wanting to not talk about this. The other part wants to just lay some of these things out. This same guy may have been a second shooter. But, again, all conjecture. The denials of evidence that are coming out, and then the admission that they were okay. In some regard, like there was the date of the 25th came up that the Paddock was in the room with guests on the 25th, not the 28th. The FBI and the Las Vegas police denied it. Now they're admitting it. And a woman, I don't remember her name, Laura Loomer, maybe if that's correct. I apologize, I don't know her name. Like I said, I don't get that close to it. I think she was the one that outed the evidence early on. The point is, when you get right down to it, it only matters to the extent if it was a plan for the government not to give that information out because they're looking at all the bellhops and wondering who knew that, then it makes sense that they were holding that back. And at that point, it's not necessarily that conspiracy. But when they go beyond, and then they say that there's nothing going on about that, and there's other things they don't show, then you start wondering what's really the story. That it really doesn't matter in some regard whether or not there's someone there 25th or the 28th. Yes, in the chronology and all the setup, it matters. But really, do you still know what went down? And so we focus on that point, and we still don't know what went down. And my mind says we need to know what went down. We need to know why, not because we need to be able to that we can predict. We're not going to ever predict this stuff this kind of thing ahead of time, but we can see the wrapper on it and identify it really quickly. And once we get motivated and actuated as a people, we're going to be hitting the more important points immediately. we're going to be going after these things. We'll be jumping all over it and holding on to with both hands to stop these psychopaths that are in the system, to try and get your government to change really quickly and giving you up to it. But again, as I've told you, look at everything that's going on as evidence, if you will, and you can pull it together. Dianne Feinstein, even, this is a woman that went after assault weapons. She even admitted, and I would bring this out as a fact to present to anyone, that she says no law could have stopped Las Vegas gunmen. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why that's going to be the fact, but now she's admitted it. Even though it's the staunchest opposer of the Second Amendment, though she'll deny it, agrees no law fixes this. So it's very, here's evidence, folks. You can hold against this whole thing, going against trying to alter your society in ways that are more dysfunctional even now. And remember, you're going to be underneath all of that terror, literal terror, unexpected. You won't, we'll all be able to looking around and things, but you'll be underneath that until they've got their way or until you start stepping in to stop it. So there's no law that can stop this, which would have been common sense. She wouldn't have said that before. Something's afoot here. Something's going on, but we need to be more aware of it. I'm not thinking any one of you anywhere would be a victim of any of this. It's the point of the societal impression that it makes and the system of control and informational control that goes on. So what I asked last week, and what I would like to have had time to do, and the facilities, was to do an audio analysis. Well, apparently, about the time I'm talking about that, someone is actually doing a basic forensic, what they consider a basic forensic acoustic proof, and it was the Mike Adams of the Health Ranger. And I've been critical of Mike Adams' content on his website in the past, but I will take wherever I can get what appears to be an honest, straightforward truth without spin. He sat down and figured it out with basic science and physics and math about this acoustic signatures, just like I was asking at the time. Well, he starts it. I think it needs to go more, but that's neither here nor there. I have a video for you if you haven't seen it on his analysis. He goes, it's like a 30-minute discussion. He goes through how you go about finding out where the shooters were, and he does identify two. And then at the end, he suggests there could be more, because his was a basic analysis, and that's what I was saying. I need to be able to see these sound signatures and analyze the sound signatures, see if they're coming from different guns as well as looking at timing differences. Well, Mike Adams goes through that. The time I'm saying we need to do that, he's doing it. He also suggests if you take every recording, and I'm telling you this so that you can see that this should have already been done, and that it's not being done or not being told to us or nobody's doing it is really one of our problems. If you take the sound signatures of every recorded device and you start drawing circles after you define the timing distance, the timing difference between the bullet hitting somewhere close to the camera and then the report from the gun, the last one, you'll find the distance to the shooter from that camera point. If you identified every camera audio recording and its location, and you draw circles from those timing differences around it, you will start crossing circles. Wherever the circles cross is another place that is most likely where someone was standing. In other words, triangulation. He goes through all of this. So I was I appreciated the effort of showing people it's really not that. Yeah, you have to have some thought, but it's not that hard, and we're not doing the hard work that's not being done by those that should be doing it. And if they're not doing it and keeping it from us, we'd like to know why when the anomalous information starts coming up. I understand fully the other side where you don't want people to know what you know, and you want to find out what they know that they shouldn't know if they weren't involved. I got that, but at some point when it starts to come out clearly, then we have a problem with disclosure, don't we? And that starts to be problematic because we are in a time that literally the government cannot be trusted. I mean, it was supposed to be, they call it public trust for a reason. For all of you that'll poo-poo that right off the bat, it's supposed to be public trust for a reason. Now, we use this obligation and duty as one of the high bars to put up against everybody that comes against land disposal, and they can't clear it. So I know it's a powerful position, whatever we see going on. And so we hold the public trust. The trust is confidence. They got their confidence men if they beat you to it. And so they have all the Mandalay effect has a broad-reaching provisions of how the Mandela effect actually approaches our mind, or how we miswitness what's going on. So, again, a connection. They go to the analysis. The forensic analysis shows that there's at least 2 shooters, and the distances. So we can do this if it should be being done. This is not unknown stuff. This is not even points of conjecture. I don't even worry about whether or not there's 1 or 2. It appears there is 2. Now what? So we get people on the ground starting to do stuff, I guess. If you want to be the so-called citizen journalist, you can do that too, whether or not the system will agree. We got plenty of platforms to get the factual information out. We have plenty of time, if you will, to not use conjecture. And so we've got more information to do. There's enough audio to analyze. I wish more people would do that. I think it'd be, that to me, that's kind of exciting to figure that out. If nothing more, to see, okay, how did this thing get put together? In your mind, when you're walking around and looking at places, how might areas be set up to stick you in a paddock and make an example of you? So the second shooter issue comes up, and okay, fine. I mean, I'll tell you, folks, my ear is certain there was at least 2 shooters. You can't have compound firing at the same time and not have more. Well, unless some guys at least holding 2, doing the Rambo. I got two big SAWs running, firing a flame out. Unless you got some guy doing that, you're not going to get 2 guns firing at the same time. I hear my ear hears that. So that's been kind of my point. I don't know how many there are. I don't know that there is even 2, but I hear 2, and no one's been able to explain that away, that there needs to be more looking at. Because I want to know, am I witnessing correctly? Or am I going to cause a future Mandela effect for myself? Oh, I didn't know it was like that. I thought it was some way else. And so this is a test on the powers of our observation, which I find are really frail at some point. And that's the things I tell you. Those weaknesses are what is used against you, us, all of us. So, in the vein of going on the ground and looking around, I just wanted to advance to you all that the RLM reporter Vince Easley is actually in the area, and I understand from Freaker's Ball that he was talking on the ground, looking around, and he's going to do some more investigation. His preliminary investigation is there's evidence in a building called the Tropicana that is within the distance that is identified by Mike Adams, and it is facing the area, and it has some windows that have shadings that have been torn, and the windows open. Not that there were shooters, maybe just observers. The point is that there's another analysis that can be done, and Vince is over there kind of giving that report on Friday. And so this is what we can start doing to pull together, start looking at evidence. To me, it's all just conjecture until we get more facts, and we start qualifying everything. If you were interested, at one level, I'm not interested. To tell you, really, I'm not interested. I got some people, we got people around me, property, all these laws are being dissolved, people making decisions in the seats of decision, literally hurting people. It starts building to kill people. That overt stuff that we're seeing in the news is just the breads and circuses, and it's a real life, like a Hunger Games, I suppose. Maybe there's a different example, but a real life stuff's going on, and that's all to drive your mind and drive you away from your abilities, and to confuse us and to divide us. And it's going to be up to us to not allow that to happen. A contingent of us will have to do some of the hard gumshoe work, and minds of clear critical thought will have to apply all the facts critically and honestly, not make conjectural statements. So part of the continuing story is unfolding over there, and it's not just identifying that it's a psyop, if you will. It's a setup. It's a terrorism to change your views in the world or to get you to conform in a certain way. It's our understanding that we are subject to that. You're not a subject. You're subject to that. You're subject to all your weaknesses. So you're not a sovereign in that capacity. So I try to break down some of these ideas that have simple words that people try to take on that really don't work. We have everything's in context, I guess, I suppose. You are a sovereign over yourself. You may not be sovereign to your frailties about that, though. So everything in its place. This is what we have to start doing. So I appreciate Vince being over there. I was hoping he would gotten down and gotten some pictures right after the shooting, because there was questions on those windows in the Mandalay that appeared to be broken out. We didn't know about any photoshopping. I can trust Vince to give us a picture, but that wasn't available at the time. So this is why it's important to have people in place. Now we're going to get some chance to get some more information, and it might become relevant to start showing who the government players are, why they might be there, what we might be looking out for, what does that telegraph to us, and we can be that voice of better reason to stop the division, stop the fear, the people that will be fearful, the people that just don't want to spend the time and like to be scared. Why do we go to horror movies is what I think we're seeing here, and people not actually responding to the truth of things. We like to be scared. We love the breads and circuses. We're not involved. I didn't die. Somebody on the screen died. And so it's this sickness, I suppose. I guess I don't know what else to say about that one as I thought about it. I hadn't thought about it before, but there it is. So, so that's one aspect of the control of society. Another more functional, more direct control of society is your monetary system. And I've been really critical, not because it's not a neat idea, but because of what it was brought into the world to do and dictated to us before, was this Bitcoin that I suggested to you that it was going to be eventually centralized control, notwithstanding its decentralization promotion. Anyway, you've heard me say this and talk about this before. I want to point to you now, and then I pointed out there was this little quick report that came out that says that the IMF is going to bring Bitcoin or something like it, whether it's the name Bitcoin or not, and the Ethereum contract provisions which uses blockchain together. And not much response. I got a couple of people that are into this that had an opposition to what I said, but I'm going to just leave it right where it's at. We'll see. Well, here's more on that. If you didn't think that this digital, the silent weapons for quiet wars hasn't been in play, and where this stuff has been worked out, and how the plans work, and they're planned in such a future tense, you don't even see it happening, and yet it's there. You can see it happening. You watch it by their policies, you watch it by their so-called laws, you watch it, like I was telling you about even the marijuana, you watch how that law comes in and you realize, wow, they're keeping illegal all the stuff that's valuable. Now, why would they do that? Well, because that's what the plan is. In the future, you're not going to be able to do the stuff that's valuable for you. They're going to keep control of that. All right, so you just got to kind of think a little bit more clearly. You're not given anything that's not going to be controlled. What you have to do is just really take it and hold it, or keep it from being taken. But the IMF comes out here in last week before. I didn't get to this story. I want to get to it. It's very important. IMF head foresees the end of banking as Bitcoin surges above 4,400. I understand it's like over 5,000 now. Now, I found, and I think this is an anti-media story, and I'm not sure where they put it all together, how it was assembled, but they go through and show, and I wish I could do this a little bit better. Can't remember. I think this is the one I wanted to read. And I don't know if I have enough time in how to do this. It's just, there's so much to look at some of this stuff. But she goes through, in this article, Christine Lagarde is the IMF head, and she goes through and she starts to talk about ending the banks and encouraging cryptocurrencies, but they do it in such a way that it's not an absolute. They do it in such a way that it's a future look. When you see that future look, they're doing it. There's just no question about it. They wouldn't waste their time. In a remarkably frank talk at the Bank of England conference, you have to understand the importance of all this. The managing director of the International Monetary Fund has speculated that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has as much a future as the Internet itself. Well, that's the Internet of Things. Do you think she's actually just speculating, folks? No, this is a prediction, okay? This is where it's all going. And I was suggesting this to you a while back, because I think it's a trap. For as much as you can, it looks like it might be a good speculative investment, great risk and great profit potential. It's the box canyon essentially to this. So those of you that are in it, just certainly don't put your eggs in one basket here. And I don't think a few that I've been understanding are in it are doing that. So that's good. But we have to not be persuaded too much. But this is showing where societies are going, notwithstanding all the problems we've heard about it. Those problems will be fixed. As I said, if the people can't keep up, the banking system will. Banking system and corporations, international corporations will. They will be in lockstep about how this works. She says it could displace central banks, conventional banking, and challenge the monopoly of national monies. You got to listen to that. You got to listen to those 3 or 4 areas. Okay? This is what is changing. This is a very, wow, I don't even know how, this is another sea change. They've already got it worked out. This is going to eliminate all that you see here. Okay? This is all they're going to put pressure on. It eventually comes to you. As I said it a few weeks ago or a month ago or something. Christine Lagarde, a Paris native who has held her position at IMF since 2011, says the only substantial problems with existing cryptocurrency are fixable over time. There's the point right there. They know that they've got problems that are fixable, and they're fixing them. Whatever you think now is the benefit is their problem, and they're fixing that. In the long run, the technology itself can replace national monies, conventional financial intermediation, and even puts a question mark on the fractional banking model we know today. Puts a question mark on the fractional banking model we know today. So all your fractional banking knowledge and your opposition to it is going to be irrelevant real soon. You have to understand, that's what I keep saying to you, be careful what you fix in on. This is a moving target, what they have. They're going somewhere, and they got a plan for it. And if you don't start anticipating the plan, you won't be able to put your target on the right spot if you're going to be a sniper. And that was another thing, I guess, before I go to, let me finish this if I can get back to it, about this other stuff. But in the long run, the technology itself can replace national monies and conventional financial intermediation. The intermediation is what they're going to do immediately because that's internal to the system. Okay? Internal to the system. They can do that really, really, really fast. So, you're not going to see any of that. If you're going to have any control of it, you're not going to have any it's not going to affect you. Well, it does affect you, but you don't know it. You don't know how they're affecting you because what they do is they control what comes out of that system to you. And so and most of us won't be doing all that, so we won't even rise to the level of an awareness. In a lecture that chastised her colleagues for failing to embrace the future, she warned that, quote, not so long ago, some experts argued that personal computers would never be adopted and that tablets would only be used as expensive coffee trays. So I think it may not be wise to dismiss virtual currencies. Let us start with virtual currencies. To be clear, this is not about digital payments in existing currencies through PayPal and other e-money providers such as Alipay in China and M-Pesa in Kenya. Virtual currencies are in a different category because they provide their own unit of account and payment systems. Now, let me just focus you on this word account. It's the one they control in you. It's the one they control in your property. We just got the word back, and part of me is always shocked when I see this. It's the one they fraudulently create and fraudulently use to destroy you. This is what government has done, and no one's seen this, and no one's known to comment to it or counter with it. I say this with authority now. If I had a question up until last week, it ended last week. We have an admission that the counties on your property taxes use fraudulent information fraudulently. This is these accounts. And so you got to understand, you think you understand how you deal with it. It's not going to be dealt like that. It's going to be in their system. They will control this decentralized, centralized system. Remember, transparency is not the word you think it is. It's all the same. It's all the same trick. This is not the words they use or what you think they are. They're the way they use them against you. Transparency, they're working right in front of your face, and you're there. That crime is transparent to you. That's how this starts to work. So people that argue with me are just, I'm really dismayed for them, not for me. I see it. I'm not going to be the guy that goes out and speculates and becomes the $1 million jump out just in time, maybe do the put call against the currency. I'm not going to be that guy, but I can see that that's what this has to be until it's a trap. So virtual currencies are already considered in a different category. So I guess I'm reading this now, and as I'm going to continue, because everything she says, almost paragraph by paragraph, as a lot of these, I'll call them the gurus are, the movers and shakers of this are, they'll tell you pretty quickly what's really going on. They're in a different category because they provide their own unit of account and payment systems. These systems allow for peer-to-peer transactions without central clearing houses, without central banks. So they already know about peer-to-peer. Like everyone know the alt-right, whatever they are, whoever you are, oh, we got to go peer-to-peer. Yeah, they know all about it. They're going to do this without central banks. The whole idea you have about the Fed is about to disappear anyway. End the Fed. I want you to read this article to see it doesn't end the occupation or the corruption in your life. They're ahead of you. They've been that way. For now, virtual currencies such as Bitcoin pose little or no challenge to the existing order of fiat currencies and central banks. Why? Because they are too volatile, too risky, too energy intensive, and because the underlying technologies are not yet scalable. Many are too opaque for regulators, that's a key, and some have been hacked. That's another one. But remember, what did she say? All these shortcomings are fixable. And they're fixable partly by moving them into privatization. Well, it has to be. If they're going to take it back over, they remove all their central banks, and they're now getting the surrogate, the replacement. It is private, isn't it? Just like everybody knows it is. But don't forget, Congress approved it. It's a congressional condition. Better value for the money? They ask a question here as this article goes on. For instance, think of countries with weak institutions and unstable national currencies. Now, you don't think of your country as unstable, but you don't realize the United States of America, you're sitting in an unpayable debt except for the full faith and credit of the United States. It's on your breath. That's all it is. You don't realize how weak the system is, but for this control. You look at someone else and think it's them. Don't even consider it's you. For instance, think of countries with weak institutions and unstable national currencies. Well, they just said that they're going to get rid of fiat, so there's not going to even be a currency at some point real soon, it seems. Instead of adopting the currency of another country, such as the U.S. dollar, some of these economies might see a growing use of virtual currencies. Call it dollarization 2.0. IMF experience shows that there is a tipping point beyond which coordination around new currency is exponential. In the Seychelles, for example, dollarization jumped from 20% in 2006 to 60% in 2008, and then the crash. But look at the way the dynamic is. They're keeping track of all this. Are you? The most fundamental medium you use has this amount of control behind it. Are you aware of that? And if they have that kind of control over it, what control do you have? And yet, This statement goes on, why might citizens hold virtual currencies rather than physical dollars, euros, or sterling? You understand how broad spectrum this is now? Every one of you that's probably listening, and most of the countries that listen to me, are involved in that. Because it may one day be easier and safer than obtaining paper bills, especially in remote regions. Well, remember the word bills means notes, means evidence of debt. So this new system's not changing that. But it's easier and safer. And that's what everybody will plug into. And because virtual currencies could actually become more stable. How? When they centralize the control. When they regulate illegal, unlawful, everything else. For instance, they could be issued 1-for-1 for dollars or a stable basket of currencies. Well, what's the SDR but a basket of currencies? This is specific to that system. I told you it was coming to do this, that they were explaining would be utilizing Bitcoin, or just more like cryptocurrencies, and Ethereum. It's still blockchain on contract side, combined. And they're going to use that in the SDR, the basket of currency, on an international scale. She's talking about it right here. Or I should say it is being talked about right here. Issuance could be fully transparent, governed by a credible, predefined rule, an algorithm that can be monitored. Oh. Listen to the list here, folks. You want to take A, B, and C, 1, 2, and 3. Each time she's saying a paragraph, listen to what they're getting ready to control in all of this. Is everything everyone's promoting and what the cryptocurrency and Ethereum can be. Because all that stuff that you saw was freedom was fixable. And it becomes a new freedom. A new frame within which you have a range of motion. Or even a smart rule, in quotes, smart rule that might reflect changing macroeconomic circumstances. For one of my chat colleagues, macroeconomic circumstances. Smart rule, not intelligent, but it's smart, makes them in control. It's governance talk, right here. We're seeing the whole thing wrapped up in this statement. At the Bank of England. You don't miss the importance of the center of the universe right there. So in many ways, virtual currencies might just give existing currencies, a monetary policy, a run for their money. So in many ways, virtual currencies might just give existing currencies a monetary policy a run for their money. You think that's going to happen without her control? No, they're expecting this horse race. They're going to do it for a reason. The best response by central banks is to continue running effective monetary policy while being open to fresh ideas and new demands as economies evolve. There's the directive right there. That's how they're going to blend these two systems together and move right on through from the old into the new. Question, better payment services? For example, consider the growing demand for new payment services in countries where the shared, decentralized service economy is taking off. That sounds like shared prosperity to me. Shared, decentralized service? Do you hear the trick, folks? Please, don't deny this. If you deny it, I don't know what to say, but you can. You're free to deny it. Shared, decentralized? This is an economy rooted, this whole thing itself is an economy. Forget everything else. This thing itself is an economy rooted in peer-to-peer transactions, in frequent small value payments, often across borders. Global governance, anyone? Peer-to-peer, anyone? Frequent small payments? They've got it. They already looked into this, folks. It's all there. $4 for gardening tips from a lady in New Zealand, €3 for an expert translation of Japanese poem, and 80 pence for a future rendering of historic Fleet Street These payments can be made with credit cards and other forms of e-money. But the charges are relatively high for small value transactions, especially across borders. So your e-money is actually this system already in play. They've been getting you used to it. And their problem, it has to be they're having another inducement for you. Right now, the small transactions are high value. They can fix that for you, folks. Safer and more secure. Instead, remember, they went from central banking elimination to peer-to-peer centralized non-central banking to now the people. The lady in New Zealand. The expert translation from Japanese in Europe. They're now to citizens. They're down to you. This global structure is down to you in the future. They're already telling the central banks to get ready for this. Instead, citizens may one day prefer virtual currencies. They've already predicted you into preferring them. Instead, citizens may one day prefer virtual currencies since are you missing? Prefer means you consent, folks. It's you plugged yourself in. The silent weapons of quiet wars. They got you. Instead, citizens may one day prefer virtual currencies since they potentially offer the same cost and convenience as cash, no settlement risks, no clearing delays, no central registration, no intermediary to check accounts and identities. There's the future promotion on a platter for you, what's going to be happening. You're going to think it's right as rain. And they already figured out it doesn't matter that they don't have to do an intermediary checking accounts and identities. They've got another way to do it. They've fixed that problem. You think it's safe. You think it's separate. You think it's anonymous. They don't care about it. They've got it already figured out, and they've got some other things they're dealing with. It's coming. If privately issued virtual currencies remain risky and unstable, citizens may even call on central banks to provide digital forms of legal tender. You see how that works? This is right out of the script book. They create this hardship on you, and you just demand it of them to provide it. Help me, help me. And they say, sure. What is this, like Hegelian dialectic? This is the way problem, action, solution. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone knows about it. Should I mention his name? Alex Jones has been promoting this the whole entire time, and everyone says, yeah, I can repeat those three words, not knowing they're already in it. They're already been. Their nose. I'm going to tell you, you got your ring in your nose. You're an accessory to the crime against you. The alt-right can't see any different and any better than the alt-left. You're all looking at a blind eye, and the other one's looking the wrong way. I'm pausing. People, you got to think about this. This is right in front of us. So when the news service economy comes knocking on the Bank of England's door, will you welcome it inside, offer it tea and financial liquidity? She's anticipating for them what they're going to have to be turning their minds to do and their functions to do. Because that's where it's going. New models of financial intermediation. This brings us to the second leg of our pod journey. Remember those apodments, folks? Remember what you're going to be living in, this small little thing? Remember, the Matrix is not a movie. On our pod journey, the keepers of you looking at the stacks and stacks of energy resource generation from you. You plugged into those pods, and you haven't unplugged for yourself, and you probably won't. You don't even know how. And if that's an insult to you all, be insulted, but understand that's the truth. Not behind the woodshed, just 'cause. On the second leg of our pod journey, new models of financial intermediation. One possibility is to break up or unbundling of banking services. In the future, we might keep minimal balances for payment services on electronic wallets. The remaining balances may be kept on mutual funds or invested in peer-to-peer lending platforms with an edge in big data and artificial intelligence for automatic credit scoring. You got your Equifix from the IRS, folks? You think this is not big-time global control? What have I been saying for years? Big data. Watch out. Watch out the private. Big data is going to be worse. They're telling it to you right here. But it's all, remember, these corporations are all driven by laws local to a government that does have control of that. So don't ever forget the connection to the government always, and in particular with the full faith and credit of the United States and the dollarization of the whole globe. Realize they didn't change it. They didn't talk about it in any other fashion. It's not going to change its name. It's still going to be dollarization 2.0, nothing else. So how do you like that for automatic credit scoring, folks? And they're going to take any of your extras and they're going to put them in mutual funds, which you won't ever see. They probably already do that now. I think they already partly do that. This is a world of 6-month product development cycles and constant updates, primarily of software, with a huge premium on simple user interfaces and trusted security. Make it simple for you to get in. And they're on the pulse of this turnover. They say that the bulk of it is in software, but not all of what they do for product development. Their product, which is your servitude, globally. So some would argue that this puts a question mark on the fractional banking model we know today if there are fewer bank deposits and money flows into the economy through new channels. That's a dismissive statement if you don't get the tone. They're not, that's irrelevant now. They're moving on, folks, and you're going to be moved on with it. Next question that they're approaching here is how would monetary policy be set in this context? So we have fiscal policy, and now we're on to the monetary side. They're covering the bases in a speech before the Bank of England. Today's central banks typically affect asset prices through primary dealers or big banks to which they provide liquidity at fixed prices, so-called open market operations. I hope you got a whole lot of that. Boy, that's a full sentence all by itself. Remember, the assets are really these debts. It's the ability to move this debt around. That's part of how that works, is you got to keep it moving. It's a big fraud on everybody. Everybody's subject to it and subject by it. And that's why I keep bringing it up. It's not a total answer, but if you go to start moving away from this and into having to make deals with somebody face-to-face with silver coin of the right value, not the face value, obviously, and possibly gold coin for your bigger purchases, we're going to be able to weather some of this, I suppose, but I don't know that enough people are coming along. How many years have we been looking at this? And we just don't hear the infrastructure being built for the old way, the tried and true hand-to-hand oral contract, commodity to production to user to needer, whatever you want to call the recipient of the production, paid for in a substance equal to what they've received, not as a debt, not as an outstanding loan asset that they continue to bond up because it's a debt instrument that they can do it. Today's central banks typically affect asset prices through primary dealers and banks. But if these banks were to become less relevant in a new financial world and demand for central bank balances were to diminish, could monetary policy transmission remain as effective? Well, I think she's given them the answer, folks. I think it's all about happened. So, I read quite a bit of that. In fact, I read it all. And it's coming, what was that, Anti-Media? So what? You can go there. I got the link. I suggest to you, I read that. I was captivated by that discussion. That was fulfilling about everything I'm telling you is coming. It's so far into the advance ahead of us. It's really kind of scary in a way. And it's only scary because I don't see as many people. I see the same thing in that as I see people who think they know about like Constitution and law and rights and all this and property and how to, and then yet they don't know how to protect it. They don't know how to use the right medium. Oh yeah, okay, I'm now spelling again. I'm some magic guy. No, this is how the system is working. This is what you have to understand. You have a knowledge that you can't apply is useless to you. and yet that knowledge was required in you to be functioning, is what I keep talking about behind the woodshed over and over. And for as much as a few people will disagree with me, it's coming, folks. It keeps coming over and over. Before I move on into the same, I'm going to show you how what I was speaking to about Ethereum and Bitcoin is in the world. It's happening whether or not anybody wants to agree with it. The corporations are doing it. I wanted to touch a little bit, and I forgot to do this a little earlier, about I did mention it, I forgot to follow through, about like on Spreaker. If you go listen on Spreaker, put a thumbs up so I know that you were actually listening there and not from YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, put a thumbs up there. Normally I get about 11 or 12 or 15 thumbs up, whatever they are. It's not that many. I'd like to know that because it keeps me on course on the thumbs up. If you could do that, if you go on Spreaker, if you do it this week, I'm not looking at them as any indication more than you were at Spreaker or you were just at YouTube. And I want to do a correlation between these numbers. Only because I'm trying to figure out who's listening and how much and where do I need to go with all this. But I apparently got one thumbs down. Finally, I guess, what was it? Vince recognized, I believe. I finally got a thumbs down from somebody. I'm kind of excited. One thumbs down all this time. In what little response I get one thumbs down. But I was disappointed. The thumbs down, folks, if you're going to give a thumbs down, don't just do a hit and run. It tells nobody anything. It tells nobody nothing. To put a thumbs down and don't make a comment why. You would use that if it was valid. I guess that's the other thread, isn't it? You have to validate yourself, too, in a thumbs down. I would use any thumbs down to guide me into becoming either better or more knowledgeable on a subject, or fix an error, or any of that sort of thing. The thumbs up, I appreciate the concurrence. That's helps me sometimes. Not like, oh, I'm working on all your thumbs up. I get very little thumbs up, but I know someone's there. I know someone's listening. I know they concur. If nothing else, they at least concur with what I'm putting out. Okay, that gives me the guidance. I continue. A thumbs down, however, has the potential. Now I'm going to get a billion thumbs down all at once. It'd be kind of interesting to watch this. But a thumbs down gives me the idea that you were disgruntled or you didn't agree or whatever. Whatever it was. Maybe you clicked wrong with the mouse. How's that? That could even happen there. See, I'm not too wound up with this, but I try to use it as an instruction to me. You put a thumbs down without a reason, you haven't done much. It's useless to me. It's useless to you. You actually start to look more of without a reason, you kind of look like a contrarian without a purpose. And so I guess I want to touch that a little bit, because not that I have to see all the thumbs up. I'm trying to figure out how to get at y'all, folks. I'm trying to get at you. Trying to get you to see there's things that have to be understood and done different and better, way better. And it's because my experience with working with people is kind of dismal. When it comes down to the rubber meeting the road, we are really a hurting society. And I don't mean just the United States. We really have to raise that bar for ourselves, and that will require that those around us that look to be our so-called, or profess to be a leader, will have to do a whole lot better. A whole lot better. So let me appreciate the little bit of time here that you listened to that about the ups and down votes. I try to see what I can out of them, but I'd like to see more comments if you have a problem. A difference of opinion, well, we all have that. That's not what my concern is. That's not what my interest is. I'm trying to find out what it is that I can do to bring a more workable or amenable or relevant subject matter every time I do this. So moving over into telling you that there was confirmation proof that the IMF was running into utilizing blockchain technology, and whether by currency or by contract or both. I ran into now here, we come and following through. A BP Tech chief says blockchain could give company competitive advantage. British Petroleum, now remember the connection here, the Bank of England and the Queen's own petroleum company. Remember, we still are suffering the attacks of the Queen trying to take back the South in the Horizon oil spill, remember? Gas and energy giant BP believes the use of blockchain could give it a competitive edge in the market, according to its technology head. Many-headed Hydra, I suppose. Speaking with the Financial Times, head of technology David Eaton struck an optimistic tone amidst working with fellow energy firms Wine, Energy, and Eni Trading and Shipping, who together with BP have been testing the tech on an energy trading platform developed by Canadian startup BTL. Now, we just heard the IMF chief talking about these platforms. Now, I'm a little familiar with them because this is what happens when you try to monetize a mining claim, and you it's a lot of work and a lot of waste of time at some level. But this is those trading platforms in the world. This is how you get out in the world with the values that are required to do the work it takes to get the production out. It's like work like this forever. The miner has to go find someone who can usually have the money to develop what it takes to get the mineral out that he's found. This is just how that works. Why I wasn't so impressed about the Rockefeller story and the oil. That's just how that works. It's just what happens. It's just history. You just can't get around that. I can't exploit it as the reason for being in the condition that we are. It's just what happens when you are one guy who finds something you can't develop yourself. You have to go look for help. It happens to come in the form of corporations. In other words, a bunch of people that want to make a profit on their investment in their investments in you. That's all this is really about at that level. So, Canadian startup BTL, it's another corporation providing a tool that integrates this whole thing where companies now are utilizing the blockchain. Following the conclusion of a successful trial earlier this year, the firms involved are said to have been looking for more participants as part of a broader commercialization drive. Now let me throw in the mix this problem I told you about Clark County, Chicago, and they were going to do this blockchain regarding your property, your property in the tax, in the clerk's office, which is also part of the tax thing. Remember, it's all tied together. They're commercializing those properties, and this is the fraudulent record I told you. We just got confirmation a county agreed they make and maintain and use fraudulently against everyone who comes into their sites. This is all the same, folks. You think I'm talking behind a woodshed? I'm looking out across the globe here. This is how it works. This is the method. They're going to commercialize everything they can get away with, where appropriate. That's the Bar Association's own words. It's appropriate when they get away with it. They get away with their dastardly deed. That's it. That's all the definition really means. So they've already been testing this, folks. Like we knew the Clark County, months and maybe a year ago, I told you about that in the news, about commercializing your properties. And while Ayton didn't say whether BP is gearing up to use blockchain on a production scale, he did point to its ability to help clear transactions. A potential boon for one of the biggest companies of its kind. Didn't IMF Lagarde say clearing transactions? This is big connection stuff right here, folks. There are uses for blockchain that could give us a competitive advantage. This is all right. I mean, did they sit in the same office that Lagarde made her speech? And I found this not in regards to Lagarde as a different place. It just popped up the same time I read the article right before. I said, wow, these are written out of the same script house if that's what happened. They listened to the same thing that they were doing. This was happening before Lagarde came out and said her speech. If you don't think these are connected, you really have to blink a couple times and look a little bit closer. Blockchain can be more efficient in terms of speed and verification of transactions. Eaton also hinted that BP might wind up applying to tech to other business processes beyond trading, indicating possible uses in the area of intercompany payment settlements in particular. What did Lagarde say? Interagency settlements, financial settlement. This has all been laid out. A lot of that lends itself to blockchain, was a sentence confirming that. The leader in the blockchain, as they try to move this forward, they bring more in. There's no buy-in. They become that leader as well. And it's the Queen, and it's the Bank of England, and it's talking in the sense of the IMF. These are people, people, the men and women in this are really no different at some point when I look at this. Next story. Now we had the blockchain. They talk about the Bitcoin type blockchain thing. J.P. Morgan, Santander said to join new Ethereum blockchain group. J.P. Morgan is joining a new Ethereum side. So now you have the contract side and you have the other blockchain settlements, payments. And they're coming together. We'll see how this works. New details have emerged about a soon-to-be-launched initiative focused on enterprise uses of the Ethereum protocol. The Ethereum protocol. We're not necessarily talking about Ethereum, see, as I was saying. We're looking at them as protocols. It's something you use. In the blockchain for the payments, it's to set for settlements. Here, it's in the contracts. Dub Ethereum Enterprise Ethereum, the project's founding membership, is said to include major financial institutions, tech giants, and natural resource companies. According to the sources, participating firms include J.P. Morgan, CME Group, Coronal Mass Ejection Group, wow, that's good. BNY Mellon, Banco Santander, Microsoft, Red Hat, the Linux people, Cisco, Wipro, and British Petroleum, among others. Now, we just heard British Petroleum using blockchain. Now we know it's connected to Ethereum through British Petroleum, and they're trying to get a bigger put in, but they just did the experiment to find out it works. This is a global multinational collaborative upon your future finances, essentially, upon how you will look and deal with the world. Blockchain startups, block apps, BrainBot Technologies, Consensus, it's a felony against you, Nuco and Tendermint, as well as the Ethereum Foundation, the nonprofit that oversees its code creation, are also said to be involved. For all the deniers on that point, and I'm soft on that, no judgment. This is just what's going away. I'm not invested at all. I just look at how this stuff pours out on people and what it's getting ready to do. Here's another follow-up story to confirm everything I said before. Again, it's just out there. Many of the companies on the list have already worked with Ethereum, such as J.P. Morgan, which has developed several projects based in that code base. Notably, Enterprise Ethereum appears to include both existing and former stakeholders in the R3 blockchain consortium. So I won't read more. I think I've read quite a bit. Normally I don't do that much. This was such an important connection and story to show you. This thing is rolling out. This so-called cashless society is rolling out globally so quickly. They've been doing it. That you better really take note and understand what that might start to mean. And in particular, like with the Equifax problem and the IRS stepping in, and they talked to you and they said already that it's going to do with that very same system, what they're doing to integrate you in a way that they got the switch, essentially. They got the switch over you. There's no distinction, no way to, once you're there, there's no way to even, get out of it. There's just no way to make it work. What can I say? You're in it. You're of it now. You can be in it, just don't be of it. Well, you're of it. If you're of it, folks, you're created by it. Of. So you're not even yourself. So we heard earlier that this thing is moving, but that the problems with it are fixable, and they find that they need to contain it within the government structure, notwithstanding its decentralized It's shared decentralization. So that we're seeing how the countries are now moving along and have been. We can go back to discuss how China was given the task to create the global condition where relative to possibly the SDR point and then funneling it down to their people because of a big population. Well, Russia hasn't been on the sidelines. Russia signals its willingness to professionalize cryptocurrency trading on exchange. So now you're watching how they're going to do this on the platforms of the exchanges, and you see the word professionalize is the commercialization of this. That's what that word means. In fact, not that I can remember any of the Russian I was thinking I was going to know more of, but they just the psyche of the Russian would speak more truthfully about this, and they know it's the commercialization. They know it's in the commerce side that's controlled. And so I take a bigger truth on that word, actually, in that title. A Russian signal willingness to professionalize cryptocurrency. That means that they're going to be controlling. In fact, Putin is very concerned over what this cryptocurrency in its unregulated state can actually do. It's what everyone's involved in it right now with. But those things are going to be fixed. You just got told to notice. Got Bitcoin? Russian regulators are taking steps to allow for trading in it on the Moscow Stock Exchange if you're a qualified investor. Enough said there. That's how they're doing. I talk about registering guns, and they take them. They're registering you and your money. That's it. You're not going to perform without being a terrorist in the system. That's why they're not afraid of it. So I don't understand why people didn't see this going in. They're not afraid of this because they had their hand in it the whole time. Yeah, go ahead and end the Fed. Go ahead. They're going to get out of fiat, they're getting moving from so-called fiat into another virtual now. It's still fiat, but that's now underneath their control without even the printing of a dollar, a note. You have to get in as a qualified registrant. Next story, big banks are coming for Bitcoin. Why? I mean, what if there's such a heinous thing? Why? Well, because the big banks are coming. IMF said you start opening your doors to it. They're going to. Lagarde said do this. You may have been resistant before. You cannot don't be afraid. We've got that all handled. No matter what Jamie Dimon may say, Bitcoin's durability can be expressed in one simple fact. With a market cap of $100 billion, digital currencies have become too big for banks to ignore. Is that truly the truth, though, folks? No, not from Lagarde is saying. They have already been working with underwriting this entire thing to go in that direction. Has nothing to do with the market cap for a Bitcoin. Has to do with the protocols used to move this thing into the global governance dimension. Anyway, they go on to Jamie Dimon's calling this whole the Bitcoin a fraud and all this, folks. That's just a show. More breads and circuses. These people know exactly what they're doing, and if you found counter to that, you thought that they didn't. Well, they're playing you again. I guess is what I can see. Now, from those of you that wanted to end the Fed and you think this was a good story, I thought this was kind of typical of what the IMF is saying. They're going to burn the fiat currency. Well, for those of you that were looking for it, hoping for it, fire breaks out on the roof of the New York Fed right about the time they're making this conversation that fiat currencies may be on the ropes for virtual currencies on an international, national, and local scale. Dozens of firefighters are fighting a blaze which broke out on the top of the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. The fire broke out sometimes at 8:40 on the roof at a 14-story building, not 13, but 14, at 33 Liberty Street in Lower Manhattan, for all you numeralomancers, whatever you are. Anyway, enough said there. A fire breaks out on the Fed. I thought it was fitting for what Lagarde is saying. Yeah, we're going to torch we're going to torch what you think is a fiat system. We're going to bring in this new system. It's called the cashless society. It's for the new global age of shared wealth. How's that? Shared wealth. Shared decentralization. Some of this is really, really funny to me. I don't know. Let's move on. Next country. As you see, think about how fast this is happening, folks. Japan to begin supervision of cryptocurrency exchanges. Oh, man. It really is funny, folks. Japan is to introduce an oversight on virtual currency exchanges next month, but authorities are still hashing out how to do so. So that again, they'll fix it. It's happening. The countries are coming around, and it's going to be to their benefit, folks. They're going to be to their control. You are the human resource, and what you got together to make called corporations is out there to outmaneuver whatever you do as long as you continue to allow it. And you can get all involved at your county, your straw man names, all corporations, all this nonsense, or you can figure out that's the tool they're using to kill you with, and you better take that weapon away. You better figure out how to take that weapon away. Otherwise, they're going to kill you with your own voluntariness into what you believe your belief is about what you're doing. But what you feel, and you probably rightfully, because they have you in shared austerity, shared prosperity, which is austerity, they have you into this work you to death. You're a human resource. I work and profit from you mentality. It's there, and we have proof of it now. Japan's going to bring in this regulate their cryptocurrency so you all can use it, and you're all going to be registered to have to use it. Japanese woman dies from overwork after logging 159 hours of overtime in a month. I think Japan is like the third or fourth largest economy in all the world. It doesn't seem like it, that little place, but there it is. Japan has again, how do you think they're doing it, folks? Well, they're literally working people to death. And if you get on your cryptocurrency, they're going to work you to death for virtual currency on top of it. Japan is again was forced to confront its work culture after labor inspectors ruled that the death of a 31-year-old journalist at the county's public broadcaster has been caused by overwork. And this is a real thing, not just just wasn't a story. It actually has a name. It's called karoshi, death from overwork. And they can tell you all about it, but these people, these companies that you are human resource. You are animal resource to be used like any farmer. So keep it up, folks. The tales, the stories in our face all over, and we dismiss it at every turn. What they do in the United States, they did it the other way. They got rid of all your benefits by putting benefits to the corporations to keep you only working 29 hours. So you're not working at all. And then you took away your production base. And so you see the end is nigh at some level. They just drag this thing out, and you're going to be spending more and more money to get less and less on less and less capacity and less ability to counter it when the problems hit. That's the other thing. That kind of bothers me more than anything else. You have no internal abilities to do much. I kind of live like that behind the woodshed. There's just no extra. None. I mean, it's not even that you're living on debt. There's just not extra. Nothing can go wrong at all. And I'm almost holding my breath that it won't, but at some point saying, well, that's not up to me anyway. I do what I do. I do it as best as I can do. And I don't try to do the things that most people complain about, like for health and things like that. You hear it behind the woodshed on health things and such. But they'll work you to death. It's not a joke. The Japanese firm fined token sum. Talk about virtual currencies and blockchain tokens. They're already fined the token sum after a woman died from overwork. There's a follow-up story that in fact this happened. This is not a joke. These people are working people to death, or not working you. Let you get fat and happy, so you just you're a nice little pig to go to slaughter. So what about this working being worked to death? Wouldn't that woman have been benefited by maybe what they call a pink slip in the United States? You're ordered that you don't have a job no more, like go away, we don't need you. Well, this is what happened in one of the cases back in Britain. In their politics, I didn't quite understand what a P45 was. I'm thinking it was little bit bigger than my P38 can opener, which I don't leave home without. I haven't been without it for decades. But a P45, maybe it's a 45 gun. I don't know. Well, it turns out that a P45 is a pink slip. Then I got the joke. The P45 prankster Simon Brockton will face no further action, police say, when he attempted during a Conservative Party conference, to hand keynote speaker Theresa May her P45 form, which he was asking, what should have been, we're suggesting giving her a pink slip. So maybe this was an idea, as I'm adding this, if the government's going to work you to death with some human resources, maybe time to start handing out pink slips. Maybe this guy, this comedian, is telling us the truth, giving us the insight of reality. Funny, but not so funny. Maybe it's a solution. How are you going to give someone their pink slip? Maybe it's time for figuring this out, because they're working you to death. Literally, they're going to work you to death. They're going to work you to fatten you up, make you unhealthy, and then you'll die, and then they'll get their cracker out of you. I wish people could start putting this together in more than just, oh yeah, I see this scary story in the front, in the future. Oh, I see the movie rolling out, but I'm going to just sit here and do nothing about it. It's everything that I'm seeing that has a function that's stoppable. It's just a big, violent crime that's transparent to everybody, it seems. So, in an off theme about being working or going to volunteer yourself into servitude, it brought up the idea when I saw this next story, which I really haven't been following, but I just saw some interesting things in it that get us right back to thinking about, for me, us, and for you, what's actually going on about it. P45, we get maybe a pink slip to go to work. Well, what if you just walked away from your job? What happens with that? Well, there's been a story about that, and it was in the military. It's a little bit different than walking away from a job, but it was interesting to follow through a little bit when I saw some things that were a little bit striking to me. Bergdahl expected to plead guilty to deserting his post. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is expected to plead guilty later this month to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy rather than face trial for leaving his Afghanistan post in 2009, which you may have heard. Remember, that's the guy that Obama had to return five terrorists, so-called, the same people that they were paying. They had to return 5 to the other side to get this guy who supposedly, now it's reported he's going to agree he deserted his post. Bergdahl's lawyer declined to comment. Bergdahl faces 5 years in prison on desertion charge and a life sentence for misbehavior. Now, I know all the military guys listening to me will say, yeah, darn right, darn tootin', yeah, whatever, boo, whatever you say. Yeah, okay, I didn't realize that life sentence for misbehavior, because I'm looking at this misbehavior as like social engineering's behavioral control as well. And I understand what they're doing there is very serious. I'm not dismissing any of that. What I'm looking at is it just shocked me to see misbehavior could render a life sentence. What is that? It starts to tie together at some point in my mind. Because this is where they're going with the outer society, and I keep telling you that we're actually under military consequence with it. Remember, you're all deemed to be enemy combatants. This is and then they took away, at least as I can still see it being funded, they took, indefinite detention is no joke. So I see a little bit different story playing out, so I had to do some research on what this life sentence is on misbehavior. And why is this guy pleading guilty to that? What's the story underlying all this stuff? Especially when I read investigators said Bergdahl suffered from schizotypal personality disorder at the time he left. Now, those of you in the military or have been there may know about these military code of justice better than I do about mental incapacity. But apparently, that's not a defense. Think about that. They know he has a personality disorder, and they're accepting a plea from him. So I don't know about this on the military code of justice. I actually got a page up to start reading it, found some more astonishing things, as it just almost confirming what I've told you before about the military consequence. But schizotypal personality disorder is a mental disorder characterized by severe social anxiety, thought disorder, paranoia, hallucination, derealization, well, that's society, transient psychosis, well, man, society's suffering this, and often unconventional beliefs. What's that anymore? The new normals. So, that's not a thing I'd be walking into a criminal case thinking that I could be prosecuted for. I'm mentally messed up. And yet, this guy's agreeing to a guilty charge for 2 charges. Now, if this guy's mentally touched where they give off, that's a defense anywhere else, I have to wonder about this military justice thing. I don't know. I don't know the story. I don't know the legal deals going on behind all this. But the story stopped making sense again as it did the first time here. But I did go over to the military justice fact sheet, just as a note. And I wish I could highlight my tabs to go right to the point, because there's a ton to read on this Marines Mill site about the military justice system in summary. What I will just say in paraphrase is, if you look very carefully, you will find them talking about civilians. That's everybody that's not in the military. And they will say, and you will see, that even civilians, even though they say that the military code of justice is the Supreme Court, they'll mention a couple times, the Supreme Court said it can't attach to something not liable to the military code of justice. If you look very careful, you'll see that civilians can be subject, and it doesn't mean you don't have to be attached to the military. And so I can't remember now in this quick time. I went through and tried to find it, where I read in two spots. If you read carefully, you'll see just what I was saying earlier about your indefinite detention and your condition when you come into being subject by what's going on, by what the military decides. This is not up to you. This link should, when you read through it, quite a bit to read, but I think it's very instructional, especially where you start seeing, as a civilian, you actually might be liable under the military code of justice. And why is that, actually? Now, there's strong evidence. I mean, you'd go a long way to find anybody who wasn't actually tied to the military to be prosecuted, but that's not actually the lowest rung setting of the bar in this code. It's just they haven't effectuated that yet. I was very, very concerned, actually, the way this all rolls out again, to find stuff. It's already been printed. It's already there, that the stuff that they do is, and can do, is a whole lot more than we have ever been experienced or forced to experience. They can do this at any time, just as I've been telling you. And so they speak toward members of the armed forces, but if you look very carefully, they're talking about civilians that could be brought subject. And it didn't seem like there was that much of a limit. And the only limit I know would be to bring up, as I tell you, admiralty defenses and claims. And that's where you sit in the neutral capacity. But that would be dictated by whoever made up the charges and how you could fold that in. So I apologize in some regard not having the points that I could read to you, because they're just striking. But maybe that's a good thing. It'll make you, those of you that are really truly interested, you'll go through and read this little page and look very carefully for what I'm telling you about. You'll see it. When you see the black and white, you'll understand what I've been telling you about all this stuff playing out, all transparent to us. This is totally different now than the finances, although the military backs that up. So don't underestimate that dollarization connection as well, please. This all really is connected at some point. It means something together. It's not just conjecture. The clues are sitting there, and all you're looking at is whether or not you've ever witnessed the depth of the deprivations that can happen in the oppression. Most of us have not. We see some of it. More and more is coming out. That's why I went to crickets after that memo, and no one said, well, I went to crickets. I became a cricket. Didn't respond at all. So if you thought that so-called the war of terror, not the war on terror, but the war of terror didn't include finances, well, then you're missing another point. Remember, that's most of the broadcast today was talking about how they're going into a new condition, dollarization 2.0, out of their mouths. Okay? So it's going beyond what you all knew, what you all thought, and the Fed was a dead end road. But it was a evolutionary cul-de-sac, I think, as George Carlin said. People didn't see it. I wasn't all over that. I could see Congress authorized it. It's on the full faith and credit of the United States. They have external controls elsewhere. This was a set in stone. This ain't going anywhere. So you can waste your time and all that. Good sentiment. Don't underestimate the problem there. But it wasn't where you should have put your effort, it seems. But if you don't think that all this war and stuff has to do with money, it just came out. POTUS, President of the United States, authorizes Treasury, not the Treasury, but Treasury, look very carefully at this one, Treasury, to sanction Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Treasury. Now, you have to understand the focus of power that sits in the Treasury as through the Bank of Settlements and the IMF and the World Bank and all this other stuff where they can shut down part of the so-called sovereign state of Iran's military by calling them a name, by saying that they're just by claiming that they do something. This is what's just the new progressive thing is going on, to call you a name, and now you gotta defend yourself. In fact, that was Ron Stephan was talking about that. They call you a hater, and all of a sudden now you've got the mark. And I had to think when I said that. I go, well, there's got to be a way to combat that. I suggested a way in the chat over there at UCY. You just got to turn that around. You got to confront that right up front and turn that around. I'm a hater if, and then you nail the other guy for calling you the name. The very thing that they're doing is the disrespect to everyone, and and that you are running for your office for is, if that's being a hater, then you accept that. But you're here to run for everyone's interest, not just an international interest. And if I'm a nationalist and you come after, that means you're an internationalist. If I'm a nationalist, I care for our people, and you don't care for anyone. So we got to turn these things around. So this is like working in a schoolyard. A bully is what all this is. Name, sticks and stones will break. In fact, I think that came up in Twitter. Sticks and stones will break my bones. Call them names, and all of a sudden everyone believes that's the bully calling a name. That must be something. You don't want to go against the bully. He'll beat you up, right? But here it is. I'm authorizing the Treasury Department. Remember, it's called Treasury. He says the Treasury. I don't even know if he understands this. The Treasury Department to sanction the entire Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps for its support for terrorism and to apply sanctions to its officials, agents, and affiliates, Trump said, referring to the Iran's Revolutionary Guard as the, quote, the Iranian Supreme Leader's corrupt personal terror force and militia. I have to say, folks, I burst out loud right there. Isn't the United States military right now any president's personal terror force and militia? Aren't those that CIA pays? This is all the executive branch now, remember. The personal terror force and militia. The hypocrisy, the irony of all this is, beyond. But you call out whatever you want, you call them a name, and then you mete out the punishment. And it's all through the Treasury. It's all through Treasury. It's not the Treasury, Treasury. It's through the international settlements and banking system. If you don't think the control is here. I won't go on more. This is interesting that it all came up at the same time. To me, it's all a connection. What's the other side of the connection for us? We're talking about the cryptocurrencies and the blockchains and all this, and this shared decentralization. The story coming out of the ACLU, how U.S. House proposal on surveillance does not protect privacy of Americans. This was relating to stories you've been hearing now. I just wanted to mention to it. Remember, we had the PATRIOT Act, the Patriot Act, which is not patriotic at all. It's what made you all, essentially, any misdemeanant or suspected misdemeanant, an enemy combatant, subject to no protection. And then in 2010 or to 12, when they finally put it in practice, they made everybody who they deemed to be an enemy combatant to now have no rights whatsoever, indefinite detention. Well, now they have this new one called the USA Liberty Act, leaves Americans vulnerable to unlimited spying. This is now, I told you, they're going to make this part of the law. That's the new normal. It's here. This is what this, I call it the USS Liberty Act. This is where the Israeli government, or whatever they are, I can't understand how they can be a government. The Israeli war machine, without a place, attacked an American ship, and the president was cool with that. Like what, Johnson or something? This is what's happened. They're attacking Americans with these acts. So to me, this is the USS Liberty Act, not the USA Liberty Act. And you're on that ship of state, folks, and they're shooting you. They're shooting at you. They're causing harm, damage, or killing, maiming, and whatever all else. This is on the front line. I don't know what else to say about that. This is right in the news today, letting you know this is what these people are doing, and so that there's no excuse that you can't say you weren't told. And I don't know more to say than that. People want to just shrug their shoulders. Oh, we know, we saw that, we know that. No, it's not just about knowing a thing. It's about doing something about it. So the surveillance is out, and then we get this story. Google's Home Mini needed a software patch to stop some of them from recording everything. Again, more evidence. You're not going to be safe from any surveilling technique. Google has the control of your firmware in order to stop it, which means they can take it off whenever they want. This would happen to be caught. Categories under one of the worst possible PR nightmares for Google, smart speaker. What did the IMF say about smart rules? About smart cities, wired for sound and light and whatever all else comes out of your toilet, whatever. The Google Mini Home, the Home Mini, Artem Rusekovsky was reviewing, randomly and near constantly recorded sounds in his home and transmitted them to Google. I don't need to say more. And I don't know about this PR nightmare. Google is its own PR nightmare. And if you don't see that, as well as all these other corporations that are all involved in all this stuff to use you, work you to death, and use you as the resource, the animal that you are, I don't know what to say about y'all. You can fight me, argue with me, thumbs down, thumbs up. It doesn't matter. All that doesn't matter if that's all you do. And that's the thing that kind of irritates me a little bit. So Google's thing that they had a problem with a switch inside the unit they couldn't fix, whatever. The point is, any firmware can also be hacked. Remember, all this stuff, all you've brought into your home is going to be the things and the tools they use to make an algorithm that looks at your bank account and either shuts it off or directs the funds or whatever is going to happen. Takes whatever exactions of every kind you've agreed you were when you said you were the person liable by tying into that system. 42 U.S.C. 1981, for those of you who haven't heard that and don't remember how relevant it is in these days and since the times of slavery, where everyone then in 1868 were turned into slaves, even the freed black men and women. Because if you go look at 42 U.S.C. 1981, it says the white citizens were already suffering this. This was their white privilege, so-called. You don't even know what these people are doing relative to this to you. You don't get it, I think. Some people see it. People understand it. They go read it. They understand what's going on. But wow, it's bigger and badder than I think anybody truly has appreciated. What about all these smart things of now, about tracking how good you are to somebody, what you believe, and how you're going to believe it, and whether or not that algorithm is going to put you into whether or not you get access to your money or your food or whatever you're going to do. China unveils over 100 smartphone apps that track loyalty to communism. Now, I don't want to get involved in the story. Remember all those loyalty points that you could get? And those cards that check loyalty in your grocery stores, that was the precursor to this national control. Your loyalty to the government will be checked. And this is the kind of thing that they start putting in the algorithms. You don't even understand the psychology behind it. But China's unveiling 100 so-called smart, not so intelligent phones, but smartphones, phone apps, to track loyalty. What else do we need to know here, folks? I mean, it just on and on and on. The stories are over and over and over. And so, not sure how to do all that, not what to do with it, except you just don't participate. You try to limit your access. We're still in a crossover time, but it's fast coming on that's not going to be an answer for us either. We're going to have to be a whole lot smarter about it. A lot more intelligent about it. See, it's so easy to use these words. They have us so controlled. Even someone like myself looking at the words all the time, I start talking and it's just a talk. the intelligence that we are not using is what they're using against us. They are setting up systems around us to keep us controlled at every turn. There won't be hardly any place to not go. It is not even not. Again, as I started thinking, oh, this is not this is an opinion. Or you keep telling me fear mongering. No, you're seeing it. Stop that. Stop saying this is fear mongering. This is what's happening. A lot of you listeners you're not going to suffer any of this. You're going to be out of here before this is up. But all your little ones, all your family members, all the people in the future are going to be brought into the dystopian things that we hear. And it's going to be, in some regard, it's going to be those so-called red pill takers that brought it in. I don't know if you appreciate that problem. The alt-right fell short. The alt-right became the division for the alt-left. And people didn't recognize that. So I've been pulled back, folks. I can't engage it makes sense. We can say a lot of things make sense, but in actual practice, they're actually part of the trap. The Matrix is not a movie. I said this since I saw the movie. Not just since people thought about the red pill or got on the internet. No, this is, I recognized in the movie house that the Matrix was not a movie. And we're here today and we're watching the whole thing play out. People saying, oh, I've taken the red pill, don't realize they're still eating the steak. Drives me nuts. People that talk about virtual currency like it's the next new thing, and then we'll jump on, just stomp to death the fiat currency. And I've just told you today that IMF doesn't see a difference between them, just like I told you a week before. There's no difference between them. And so, let's move on to kind of a new concept, accountability. A big joke. The other real running joke with all this. Part of this solution is to work together to bring on accountability. That's probably the main problem that we have. I've suggested records. Don't engage into things that bring you into suspicion or concurrence or accessory. Do as much as you can. When you find out that that's happened, you undo that thing. There's a ways to do all this. It's all reduced to paper. It all has a response. What's harder anymore is to get officials to be liable. And a lot of times those officials that are liable are really the ones thrown under the bus to cover a bigger harm and things. Nevertheless, it's always nice to see that there is some accountability. What I say is that shows that it's possible, and what you have to do as part of the solution is a mass of people, whatever that number is, doesn't have to be everybody, just a concentrated mass has to focus in, bore in on the fact that accountability happened once, and then you turn your attention on someone else that needs to be held accountable that looked like they were just outside the scope of what the system was willing to do. This is also part of what we do. We wish we had more people to help, but the few that we have working on this, we slowly turn the attention on those that escaped the first time, let's say. Remember, I told you about us focusing on, let's say, the Bureau of Land, the Secretary of Interior Department's Secretary, Jules. We asked her to show cause, show us how you haven't committed felonies and treason. And the next thing we got response is so-called Bureau of Land Management Law Enforcement, LEO, and the FBI attacking our chairman. So that we turned the focus on them. They came back with a response. We've had to back off. We didn't have quite enough people to really deal with that part, but it still sits there festering as a festering wound that we're now turning around because, let's say, the Dan P. Love accountability, we're going to turn around and say, okay, you guys just did Dan P. Love. We want you to revisit what happened at Jewel. And why? Not because that she's not there, because what she started is still harming people today. How about if we get accountability for this? So we don't have that yet, but we're there trying to get it where it wasn't asked for or had no foundation prior. That's kind of what I'm asking you, or exposing to you is our condition at this time. The numbers of people doing all this will start to it's like more shoulders come to the door to bust it open. And when people start realizing this is the dynamic, and stop criticizing what I'm saying or trying to ask, inane, really essentially inane, repetitive questions that get nowhere, and actually bring something to the table. Like, don't give me a thumbs down. Give me a thumbs down in a comment and say, hey, I thumbs down for this reason. Please give me some guidance if I need it. I don't think I talk in so many absolutes, except that the one that we don't move and don't act, we're wrong. We're in the wrong. We're become the accessories to those that have the plan against us. Their plan is our problem. We don't talk about that problem, don't solve it, don't work to solve it. We are going to be rolled up in it. So accountability comes before. I told you, let's move on a little bit to other things of necessity in our life. One of the main things that we would know would be air. And for certain, water. The water is important. I told you the Michigan problem, the Flint, Michigan. I said, it's not the only place you're going to see problems. I told you long before it was news, these water pollution problems are across the nation, if not everywhere. And it's really domesticated systems that are doing it, and the decisions around that. And you saw not right after, but it took even a couple of years, that just blossomed across the country. There's no place really safe. Essentially, again, in smart cities, in stack 'em and pack 'em places, in domestic water sources. They have a control structure there. It's over your health as well. But we were wondering, what happens going on with Flint, Michigan? Well, the story comes out now. Accountability to some level. A Michigan official was just charged with involuntary manslaughter in the Flint water crisis. So I don't even want to talk more about it than to look at this. What she actually did in the involuntary, she actually could maybe tick someone off, because apparently she was also charged with obstruction of justice. And so that got a bureau rat official all up in her grill, and now they're going to pull out more stuff. So that's just a notice. Don't do it that way. But we do see that they will go after people. So to me, this is for those of you that are looking to slowly engage. How do you go about it? I'd take this case as an example, an object lesson of what it takes, and that they will, first of all, okay, you went this far on this problem, and then what it takes to advance and how you advance that position to get them to go to the next one that you want taken down because of their malfeasance, dereliction, or just straight-up criminal activity. Well, I better stop there, okay, because I'm going to go off. Another example, always a new example. And really stuff I can't talk about until we get the fruition of it. So, the Flint fruition, if we were reading the stories, it was completely an inside job, completely somehow bribery, completely a dereliction of duty for people checking inherent powers to check other branches, to check other officials, of fiduciary duties that failed, that should never fail, in a system of government that was set up to literally protect people, and not in a smothering way, but in the, I guess, since I'm also looking at it, the police powers prerogative, nothing more definite than that. Certainly, general water sourcing is a police power prerogative. It's somebody looking over to make sure everyone that's integrated in a system that does that, supplying and delivering water, does it in a way that's accountable. And when that one starts to look the other way, you start seeing people die. And so, I guess, to me, it's not really more of a story. I was wondering why it was taking so long, but here that they will do it. How about if you take this example and turn it to a locale near you if you have the problem? Analyze what went on. It shouldn't take too long to do that, but there's officials that can be taken down for their whatever. In this case, it may be just a obstruction of justice. Well, maybe you need to develop that in someone before you can go after it. The point is, it's not like throwing your hands up like you have nothing to do or you can't do anything. Sometimes, and a lot of times we see this, I see this all the time, poorly, let's say, and I'm talking about a court case here, but this applies to going after somebody in an administrative condition, poorly litigated cases turn out the answer that the poor litigation provided and allowed. Is the same problem you're looking when you're going after accountability. You don't understand what you need to develop in order to make it legitimate before the objective basis, which we call the law. Like when I say, for example, and I'm focused a bit about this because it keeps coming up all the time, when some official without actual warrant in law comes under the color of their official capacity to take away your right, a property, a remedy, or an interest, or hands that right or property interest to someone who doesn't have right to receive it, that in the state code I'm looking at is a felony. When you discuss the development of evidence against someone, you have to hit that they were unwarranted in the official capacity, making a decision against a right you had that you prove, or they handed it to someone. You have to have evidence in writing of each one of those four before you have enough to go to somebody to say, this one's committing a felony. It's not just saying, oh, they're committing a felony. I don't tell you when I say these people are committing a felony, my mind doesn't end there. It's already just before I said that, I qualified in my mind the 4 points to be able to actually state that. I reconfirm I can do that for the one I'm talking on the example. When I just even generally reference that, I have a certain thing in my mind to give me the thought. So you have to lay out these elements. Obstruction of justice will have elements of how you can show that it's an obstruction. Now, the government would do that. The prosecutors would do that. What I'm saying is that every criminal thing or every breach has elements to it that you have to prove. You just don't say they breached it. You breached it by this method or in this way, and then you prove it out. Now you're positioning a record that's undeniable before the mass of the people. And that's how we start to get back what is apparent. Right, as I say, we have no remedy. That's really the remedy, us re-engaging with what we tend to want to look away from doing, what we don't do, and what we do improperly. Again, how many people do I know that say they're constitutionalists and they don't recognize the due process is the Constitution in fulfillment and just stick there. Start working out the due process. You are fulfilling the Constitution. It's not a question. When you argue the Constitution, or you challenge someone not to fulfill it, you're bringing it into question. Just fulfill the properties of the crime or the due process violation. In the recent, I told you a little bit. I told you about the injunction paper I authored. I hit all of those. We hit all the elements of the crime alleged. We hit the fiduciary breach. We hit the statutory violations. And we hit the each crime. And it's in a short sentence. It's not like you're making a big book here. There was so many, though. It was, I guess 90 counts and 15 pages, whatever the heck it was. But it was just line by line statement, simple factual statements. And you bring up the elements. You bring up the harm that you can show you are essentially entitled to not have harmed you. And you bring out that that action was a violation on top of it, and you produce your cause. I guess it's the cause of action. I kind of hesitate to say that far because everything's been reduced to a civil action, and it's really not. But that's the way the system puts it together. But it's your cause. Because this, I'm asking for, I require. Require is a soft way of saying demand. I demand a remedy. I demand to be made whole within the rights I had that weren't supposed to be interfered with. And anyway, so I kind of got a little legalism there. But again, accountability. So accountability, and we start getting all this stuff of we can't eat good food. We're not going to be thinking well. This is again, you see the systemic repetition of the plan being fulfilled in us. We needed to, maybe this is the public service announcement of the end of the broadcast pretty closely. Unlabeled genetically modified salmon discovered, sold in Quebec, Canada. So this is that Atlantic salmon from the company that invented it, that grows it out of Panama. I think it's not so slightly connected, but not yet to the point of provable. Aqua Bounty sent an increase in the salmon imports to Canada equaled the amount that Aqua Bounty was putting out of Panama, saying that we have a probable cause, at least at this point, with that record that they believe to say that Aqua Bounty biosalmon is actually being sold to y'all up there in Canuckistan. So be aware. This is how I told you this was going to happen. Here it is. It's not that I said it, but here it is. It's happening to you. Another thing about products and getting things to you in a more efficient way for them, and maybe not so good for you. Japanese mutant chickens are laying eggs with cancer-fighting drugs. So when these are as part of the pasteurization process or whatever they couch it in, you're going to be eating these manufactured eggs. And nothing's sacred, it seems, anymore. Most people, you can't eat a wholesome egg or wholesome milk. No, you got to have all the fabricated stuff so they can continue using you as the receptacle, as a parasite, the receptacle of revenue generation. Well, however you feel about it. Cough, cough. Oh, my hip, my cankles. Oh, they're getting bigger. Most people eat chicken eggs for their high protein content and healthy fats. But in the future, remember Lagarde was saying, in the future, eggs could ward off diseases such as cancer and hepatitis. Well, the last time they tried this, they actually gave you cancer trying to cure hepatitis, didn't they? That's because researchers at Japan's National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science Technology. Remember, we talked about Japan earlier. These are the people that work human resources to death. Now, these people have genetically engineered chickens to lay eggs that contain drugs capable of boosting the immune system. On what theory? What happened to the fresh egg not doing that itself? Come on. No, anyway, the controversial technique was developed to make pharmaceutical drugs more affordable and, as a result, more accessible. I guess probably the big deal there. I won't read any more. They've got all kinds of... It's just fascinating what they're doing, but they're doing it. The problem for me is that they're doing it to you. That's us, me. They're doing it to us. Okay? This is all part of the... This is going to be the big pharma bio... eventually Soylent Green cracker that you become somewhere else as well. You're going to put those eggs in your Soylent Green meal mix that they're going to bake and put chips and put a nice fancy picture on it, and maybe give it as a reward for opening a virtual currency account. I don't know. The way it seems everybody seems to work, that'll probably be a good way to predict it. And these people do all this high technology, controversial. They'll claim it's not controversial, but if those of you at Syracuse University have a question, 14 Syracuse University students diagnosed with mumps, and they were vaccinated. Now, I was kind of blown away by this. I mean, mumps is a natural thing. You get it, I think, and it's kind of over for you for the rest of your life. What happened to all these people early on that got mumps, or their vaccinations for mumps early on? They got mumps, and yet they were adults, which I think mumps is not really for you. You're not as susceptible, and yet college students got this. So, I mean, they're giving it to you. They're giving this stuff to you. Oh, but it was a little bit easier than it would have if you hadn't. Well, to me, that's controversial. Maybe we should really back off a lot of this and have a better word in our mouth. But here, they're willing to work you to death. They're willing to inject you with everything. Just like they do some bovine and some paddock right before slaughter. It's over, on and on and on. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said didn't interfere with your denial to want to go out, stop being crickets. Let's do something. There's plenty of target-rich environments. Thank you, Grimner, for what you do at reallibertymedia.com and for the broadcaster in the archives, and Freedom Network for the social network, and UCY.tv. Jules, thank you very much for what you do there. And also, remember, Minds.com, I'll put some stuff up as well there. It's usually the same stuff I do over at Real Liberty Media, but we're kind of a lot of places. BitChute as well. And Vince does all the YouTube. So appreciate it. Now, thank you very much. I'll be with you next week. Tech Diffs are nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.